Okay. Friends of Prince Yaakov Yitzchak Ben Shmuel. Friends of Sandy Davidoff, Shulamis Bas Chaim Elio. Friends of Judy Cohen, Yehudis Leba Bas Moshe. Friends of Dr. Annette Safransky, Kana Bas Ephraim Fischel. Month of Learning, Jinnel and Perry Meltzer in memory of her mother, Baila Bas Avram, and his father, David Ben Fischel Alivi. Sid Peres in memory of his wife, Sarah Bas Israel Dave. Jack Gilman in memory of his mother, Elka Bas Yeshaya. Week of Learning, Judah and Michael Peretsky in memory of her sister, Gutta Esther Bas Yaakov Yitzchak, and there are no individual days of learning today. Sorry? I'm just God.
אני אגיד לכם מה, אני לא יודע לדבר אנגלית, אבל אני אדבר עברית, ואם אתם יכולים לתרגם למי שלידכם אני אשמח. יש לנו ארגון חסד גדול בירושלים, שנקרא למען עמי. אנחנו מחלקים 150 סלי מזון כל שבוע למשפחות במצוקה, בתוכם גם יש יתומים, אלמנות, משפחות אין להם לקנות דברים הבסיסיים לבית. אנחנו עוזרים להם, נמצאים להם 150 משפחות. זה משפחה אחת לחודש, זה $180, משפחה אחת לחודש. תעשו חשבון כמה זה 150 משפחות. הוצאות ממש מרובות. מי שיכול לקחת על עצמו משפחה או שתיים, יש לי את המכונה של קרדיקה.
He supports 150 families. The basic needs, and it costs him $180 a month per family.
יש לי את המכונה של קרדיקה, מי שרוצה לקחת. תבוא, כמו אפשר כבר.
Okay, we're at the very bottom of Mamamud base. So yesterday we basically set a law that about a hidden gift. We said that when a person hides a gift, we're kind of up in the air. On the one hand, it's clear we can't really rely on that he's giving the gift seriously, because the fact that he's hiding it shows us that he might be using it just as a subterfuge to undo a later gift that he's going to give. So we don't want to give the gift. We don't want to collect with that paper. And on the other hand, we don't really want to say that it's a disclaimer. But we will say it's a disclaimer on the second one.
You can't give them to anybody.
Yeah, can't have. Yeah, it's not a disclaimer. It's not a disclaimer. We had opinions that it was, so it's not a disclaimer. But we talked about a case where it's in the middle, because he said a hidden gift for sure. When a guy says give it in a hidden way, it's for sure a hidden gift. He's hiding it. What if he just doesn't say do it publicly? That's a middle ground. So we said that that's an argument. So we want to know today. We want to know Ibailu. We want to know what indeed it's a halacha. He says in that case where he didn't say do it hidden, but he also didn't say do it openly, like we write into our Torah. Astamu, and he just said give it. Okay, he didn't say to go out in public and do it. What's the law? Rina says what? You don't have to think of it as a hidden gift, and you can collect the gift with that paper. Rashi says we do have to worry about it, and it might really be a hidden gift that he doesn't really want to give, and we don't take it. Philosophically, we won't collect with the paper. But that's what they said. We have to worry indeed that it's not a serious gift. We don't take it, and therefore that's why you have to write in the paper. And the paper you have to write. He told us go out and write it. Go to the marketplace. Go out in public, and sign it. Do it in a public way. Okay, now this we finally come to a principle that we've talked about a million times already, and that is kol chazaka she'eni ma'atayna. any demonstration of occupancy without a claim of legal ownership ain't a chazaka. That doesn't establish anything. It doesn't establish any status quo. No, it doesn't. The fact that the guy shows occupancy doesn't give him a status quo of possession without a claim. Kate said, Omarlo. He said, listen, let's say the original owner said to the guy, what are you doing on my land? And the occupant says, what do you mean I've been here? Nobody ever protested. Ain't a chazaka. That's not a status quo to put into his hands. Why? Because he didn't make any claim of legal ownership. The fact that you squatted there doesn't make it yours. He says, Shomachartali. But he says, what? He says, no. He says, I've been here and you sold me this land. You, who were the former owner, you gave it to me as a gift. Abicha macharli, your father sold it to me. Abicha nasnali, your father gave it to me. But matana as a gift, that's good. No, when it's a combination of occupancy and he has a legal claim, it's fine. Okay. But if a person is coming is on land that he just because it was his father's, ain't it then he doesn't have to make a claim. He doesn't have to say, "Oh, my father bought it," etc., etc. As long as he can show that his father was there, his possession is good enough. He doesn't have to make a legal claim for yes, exactly. He can't know. He can't know. By definition, he doesn't have to make a legal. He generally doesn't know. He doesn't have to make a legal claim for his father. Now the Gemara says Pshita. Says the Gemara says, look, it's obvious. Now there's a lot of ways to learn this religion. Let's learn it simply. Obviously, if a person has no claim to property, obviously just squatting on it doesn't give him a right to the property. So why is the Mishnah even bother to teach it to me? The answer is Ma'uditema. Since I might have thought Hi Gabra, Mizbin Zabna Le Hi Ara, I might have thought we really what the occupier really bought it. Ushtara Habalevi Irkas, and he had a paper, he had a deed, and he lost it. So the fact that he didn't say I bought it, and he just said, "Look, I was here, nobody bothered me." It's not because he doesn't have a claim, but he thought to himself like this: if I say that the original owner sold it to me, he sold me this he sold me this land. I'm really they're going to say to me, show your paper, show your deed. So he said, I really did buy it, but I don't want to get into that hassle because I already lost my paper. Okay, so therefore you would think so. Therefore, we should say to him, we should pick up the guy's claim for his benefit because we do try and help other people. So we should say to him, look, maybe you had a paper and you lost it. Because we said this is what it means. You have to open up your mouth for a person who can't speak, and don't let the weak person lose. Kamash, want to teach me what that we don't do it. In this case, if he would say what I bought it but I lost it, he would win the case. But he would win the case on the basis of occupancy. But if he didn't claim it, we don't claim it for him. Okay, now we have two famous cases that happened. Rabbanan Shakal Bidka Ba'ari. Rabbanan, what happened was there was a flood. His land got flooded, and the walls went down between his fields and others. And they didn't really, they no longer could see clearly where the demarcation was between the two properties. Also, how the Guda Ba'ari the Chazay. So the fact was, he went up and he rebuilt the wall, but he built it. Really, he built the walls he built it on his friend's property. We'll see in a minute. Didn't realize it. After the Kame of Nachman, so his neighbor came in front of Nachman and claimed against him. So Rav Nachman said to Rabbanan, Zil Hadar. He says, look, go give him back the land that you give him back the land that you occupied with your wall. You can't build it. He says, what about Zikali? He says, 1 second. He says, the guy helped me. The guy participated. How can you tell me I have to give it back? The guy clearly was okay. He was okay with me. He participated in the building of the wall. Amarle. So Rabbanan said to him, come on. He says, look, who do you hold like? Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Shmuel, the Amri. He says, who are you holding like? Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Shmuel, who said what? That the second you do something in front of a person, it's a chazaka. Remember we learned earlier. The rabbi said what? You need 3 years to establish occupancy. You want to hold like these rabbis who hold like we would hold, no, that's only when you're stuck. But normally, even 1 minute, one instant that you're on somebody's property and the guy doesn't protest, it's already yours. Okay, he says, the halacha doesn't follow them. So you want to hold because 1 minute you had it, okay, it was a mistake. You didn't get 3 years. It's not good enough. The fact is that's not good enough. Amar Lacy said to him, no, he said, what are you talking about? The guy forgave me. He helped me build the wall. What are you talking about? He came and helped me. Amar Lacy said to him, Mechila B'Totzo. He says, even the fact that he gave it It was only by mistake. He said, he said, yourself, had you known that it was your neighbor's property, you wouldn't have built your wall on there. You made a mistake. The same way you didn't realize you were building the wall on your friend's property. He also didn't realize it. The same way that you didn't know that it was his property. He also didn't know. So you can't say what that he forgave you the property. He forgave you by mistake, and if forgiving by mistake is not a forgiving. Another case, Rav Kahana Shakal Bid Kabara. Again, Rav Kahana's land was flooded, and it took down the walls, and you couldn't see the place where the wall was supposed to be. Also, how the good so same thing. He went up and he built the walls on property that wasn't mistakenly a property that wasn't his. Okay, and he got a bigger field. After the coming of Yehuda, so they came in front of the court, in front of Yehuda. Also, okay, and I see Trey Sade, and the guy, his neighbor, came and he brought two witnesses. Hanamar, one of the two witnesses said, "Tarte utiosa." He says, you know what? He impinged on his friend's field 2 rows into his friend's field. The Hanamar and the other one of the two witnesses said, "Plus utiosa." He impinged on his friend's field 3. So you had 2 witnesses. Well, you need 2 witnesses. One of them says he impinged 2 rows, and one said he impinged 3 rows. Now, obviously, there's a problem. Is this a testimony or not? Are these 2 witnesses contradicting each other, or are their testimony? He says. So what happened? Amar Leis, or Yehuda said to Rav Kahana, the Yerushalayim talked to me. Go plus. He says you have to give him back two out of the 3 rows.
Because they both agree.
Oh, so Amar Leis, so Rav Kahana said to Yehuda, 1 second. How are you doing this? One witness said 2, one witness said 3, and you're making me return the 2 on the basis of these 2 witnesses. Come on, he says, what opinion are you following? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, you're following the opinion of Shimon Elazar according to Beis Hillel, the Tanya Kosi Lord. Rabbi Shimon Elazar said, there was no argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Let's say one set of witnesses said that this guy borrowed 100 from this guy. The Echad one says, no, we witnessed the same case and it was really 200. Okay, Sheyesh B'chlal Masayim Mana. Everyone agrees that included in 3 is 2, and therefore what? And he has to pay the 2, even though we don't say that it's a lie. Okay, we said these said 2 and these said 3. This said 1 and this said 2. So it's 1, and we accept it. Where was there an argument? Al kas echos, the argument was where what? When you had one set of witnesses, echad omer mana ve'echad omer masayim. One says 100, it was the loan, and one witness says 200 was the loan. Beis Shammai says what that testimony is self-contradictory. They're talking about 2 different things. They're testifying 2 different things. And you can't put them together, and there's no testimony here, and the person doesn't have to pay anything. Beis Hillel says yesh bechla masayim mana, but Beis Hillel said no. Since one witness said 100, one witness said 200, so what? Since in the 200 includes the 100, we can at least put it together and say that they testified the same way. Okay, and we have a good testimony on 2. So the same thing over here. You're saying what? So he says what? So he asked him, who you follow? He told him, I'm following the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that said what? That according to Beis Hillel, that the testimony is good. Amarle, so kind of said, so he said, who you follow? He said, I'm following an opinion, a valid opinion. Amarle said, listen, he said, listen, I'll bring you a paper, a letter from Eretz Yisrael. The halacha doesn't follow that. And even Beis Hillel holds what? That if one guy says 100, one guy says 200, that the testimony is contradictory, and it's not. It doesn't. They don't join together. They're 2 separate testimonies. They don't join together to do it. I'll bring you a paper that's not the halacha. He says to the judge. Amar Leisa, Rabbi Yehuda said to Rav Kahana, the judge. He says, when you bring it, I'll get there. When you get there, you'll get there. In the meantime, I paskined according to a valid source, and I'm not going to change my psak halacha on your promise. You bring me a proof when we'll get there. We'll get there. But I since I had a valid source in front of me, I'm going to say the way that I say. Sure.
With regard to this case, is Rav Kahana saying, I'll make a tentative judgment and I'll leave it open, so there's no Zilzal Bezdin, or is he willing to reopen a closed
The
case,
way I understood it,
even with
yeah.
Zilzal
Let me just give
Bezdin?
you a quote if I can. 1 second.
Because we learned it, we went through. Can you
But
revise?
that's not always the same. That's not one, one simple principle.
Hartsgrove says he's going to reconsider it, which means he's going to leave it open. And
Well, that's what I'm asking. Does that's an inference that you're making?
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
Because that could have
1 second.
implications for today and the real Bezdin. A disputed fact, and trying to prove it later.
It sounds like he said, "Listen, if you'll bring it, then I'll reconsider." That's what it sounds like. Well, okay, we have to look around. Other people Bechlau read it. Says, "Listen, I'm not gonna." Other people read it the other way. He says, "Forget about it. It's never gonna happen." But we'll see. He says, when you bring it, okay, but right now you don't have it, and therefore I'm following the position I have. There's
in other words, he still has some doubts.
No, I don't know. I don't think he has. He says, I have Allah, I have a good position. And I'm not in doubt until you bring me such a letter.
But if he says he's going to reconsider it.
No, it just means if you'll bring such a letter. But
yeah,
no,
but it doesn't. The text
yeah,
doesn't say.
Yeah,
that.
he's just he's saying I have a valid
go
source to Paskin. Therefore, that's what I'm going to rely on. You got something else? We'll see. There's an interesting point because there's a famous story called the story of El Daratani. I don't know if you ever heard about it. There's a medrash that says that from the time of Rabban ben Nevat, he was a big rusher, So, and he at one point he wanted to go to the tribe of Dan. Dan were the best fighters in of all the Jewish people. They were the strongest army. So he wanted to recruit Dan to fight against the rest of Israel. And Dan didn't want to do such a thing. And they begged Hashem. The Medrash says that Hashem brought a big wind and took the whole tribe of Dan away and took them to Cush on the other side of the Sambatyon. So the Sambatyon was a river of rock and sand. And you can't...
Alleged.
Yeah. And you can't cross over it except on Shabbos. It stops on Shabbos. But then you can't cross over for other reasons because it's out of the Tchum. So nobody can ever go over there. So in any case, the story is of El Daradani. It happened at the time of the Gaonim, that a Jew was someplace in a slave block. He saw two people who were clearly Jews. One of them was El Daradani, being sold as slaves, and he emancipated them. They brought this guy El Daradani back, and he spoke a beautiful Hebrew, and he knew a lot of words that they didn't know. And he told them he was from the tribe of Dan. So the whole point was that Dan had traditions all the way back. All the way back, all the way back in history. So they had very valid traditions, and everything was fine, except his definitions. In Shechita, we have different things that pass over the Shechita. His definitions were different than the ones that we had. So they were very nervous, and they did all kinds of tricks to see if he's a fake. They'd wake him up in the middle of the night and talk to him and see if he was consistent. That he wasn't a faker, and he seemed to pass muster. So they wrote, I think, to Yaakov Tzemach Gaon. And they said, listen, the guy looks legit. What do we do? So he wrote back and he said, there's support for the guy's story, in the Medrash, that Don is there and he has all the traditions. He said, you don't have to change anything. He said, it's just like Bavli and Yerushalmi, just like, we Paskin like the Bavli and not like the Yerushalmi. He said, and you can, you can ignore what he said. It's fine. It could be he's a completely legitimate person, not a liar. But you don't have to worry about it. Our tradition is this way. And you follow it, and that's all good by Charlie. It's a little different, but it's an interesting case. I always had a big kasha because the rabbis, our halacha, we take in Shabbos always at Ben Hashmashos. Because we don't know if Ben Hashmashos is Shabbos or not. We don't know if the next day or not. So we're machmir. And we already accept Shabbos for Ben Hashmashos. We don't do halachas. So it always bothered me since I always knew these stories of the Sambatyon. I wondered even if they couldn't cross it, but they could see when it stopped. So why wouldn't they go and watch the Sambatyon and see when the sun? And they know when Shabbos. They know if it's day or night. So I used to always ask
Torah
this.
lo b'shamayim.
So I answered like, no, I'll tell you what I answered. I always ask why didn't they go and watch the Sambat and don't know when Shabbos is? And I said, you know why? Because the Sambat is also going to knows that exactly. The Sambat knows that what? That it doesn't matter if the rabbis are in doubt, and the Sambat also has to be in doubt, and the Sambat is also gonna stop when the rabbis say to stop. But another time, I'll tell you another story about the Danites that's incredible. It has to do with like Damas. But we'll get to Shavuos. You'll see there's a whole another famous story. There's a lot of things. So I'm not saying I don't. I that one is actually the one I just told you now. At least the Shiloh and Tshuva were real. Really, the question really occurred. You understand? There's other stories I'm not 100% sure about. Okay, anyway, but over here it looks like he says, listen, when you bring it, you'll bring it, or you're never going to bring it. There was a guy in a place called Kashta. He lived in the upper floor for 4 years. Okay. So the owner of the house came and he found him. The previous owner, Amarle, said to him, "My boys, what do you do in my house?" Amarle, he said to him, "Mi planya zabita de." Notice the difference. What's usually the case? The person is using occupancy to back up a claim that he bought it from the previous owner. Now he wants to use occupancy to say what? That I bought it from the guy who bought it from you. No, it's I bought it from the guy who bought it from you. Ata lekame.
Just about
The floor, the house, the upstairs where he lives. But the main point he's trying to, instead, the usual claim of occupancy is let my occupancy back up my claim that I bought it from you, but I don't have my paper. Now he's saying let my occupancy back up my claim that I bought it from the guy who bought it from you. Okay, so he said Ata lekaime the Rechia. So he came in front of Rechia for a judgment. Amalei, so Rechia said to the occupant, if you have witnesses that the person you say you bought it from actually occupied that house, he lived there even one day, then I'll keep it in your hands. I'll accept it. But if you can't bring proof that the guy you say you bought it from lived there for one day, I can't. Amrav, so Rav says, I was in front of my beloved one, my uncle Rabbi Chia. And I said to him, what do you mean? Why do you have to do that? What do you mean? A guy, why do you have to bring proof that the guy occupied it one day? Can a person buy it and sell it in the same night? So it could be that the guy bought it. And even though there's no witnesses, the fact that he didn't occupy it doesn't prove anything. He says, but I saw that what my uncle really held in the end was like this. From what he said, I understood this point. If the occupant would say, listen, the guy I bought it from, I witnessed him buying it from you, then he's believed. That's good enough. If he says, I saw the guy buy it from you and I bought it from him, that's good. Yeah, he's believed. Why? Because he always could, the same way he could have said to him, since he could have said, listen, I believe my occupancy because I believe me that I bought it from you because I'm an occupier. But believe me that I saw him buy it from you because I'm an occupier. What's the difference? You can believe him. The same way he could have said, I bought it from you. So he said, I saw him buy it from you. That's good enough. But this rule of Rabbi Chia, if the occupier is there by dint of somebody who he says bought it from the original owner, that he has to show that he lived there one day, it really makes sense. The Katani, because we learned Haba Mishum Yerusha. Remember we said before that let's say a person is there because he got inheritance from his father. So we learned the following Mishnah. That person, and really anybody, in the same way that a person says, "I'm here because of my father," and similarly, a person says, "Here because of another guy," and it's Taina. He doesn't need any claim. You see what? You see Taina who he doesn't have to say anything more. He doesn't have to say. He doesn't have to make a claim. Raya boy, but he does. You're right, but he does have to bring what? A proof. Okay, what? That the person was there at least one day. Well, I said that's not true. He says Vidilma. Who said that's what it means? And he says lo raya boy, lo Taina boy. Maybe what he meant is what you don't need a proof and you don't need a claim. The guy just says I got it from my father. That's good enough. And therefore, what you can't learn it to hear that you don't like that you need to bring a proof. Yeah, you can't prove that. By same alternative, I can say to you what it means is like this. Shani lokech. I can say, okay, you know what? Maybe by a Yerusha, by an heritage too, he doesn't have to bring any proof. He has to bring proof. Shani lokech lo shadis is a big deal. But I can say to you what that when he claims that he bought it that he bought it, it's even more lenient. Why? Because he paid money. Once a guy bought it from somebody, no guy's who's an idiot to spend his money and not check out and not know that the guy legitimately got it from somebody else. He's going to check it to make sure this guy was really an owner. So for the fact, was entitled. So that if this guy bought it, he would have checked out that the guy he's buying it from owns it, that he bought it from the original owner. So therefore, we give him credit, and therefore we could say clearly there's a difference. When a guy said, well, by Yerusha, maybe he has to bring a taina. Why? He has to bring it. I should prove that the father really was there, or whatever it is. The father lived there for one day. The father was occupied. But over here, where a guy spent money, the norm is on his side because people don't buy land like idiots, not knowing that they're going to check out that to buy the guy they're going to buy the Brooklyn Bridge, from some guy on the street. And therefore, what we give him credit. Ibailahu, the Gemara has a very interesting case. Nirabo, okay, if we saw we said you have to be, so assuming the law is what, you have to bring proof that the guy lived there for one day. Nirabo, okay, if we just saw the guy essentially measuring the property, he was just measuring it up. Okay, we don't see him actually, he's not sleeping, he's measuring. What's the law? He didn't do anything with the land, like whatever, like the normal things that show that he's, but he was there measuring it. What's the law? Rabbi says, what? That's good enough. If you see him measuring the land, that's good enough. Like he lived there one day. Rabbi said no. No, it's quite possible that a guy will measure land and never buy it. You check it out. Doesn't mean he bought it, so you can't use it as a proof. Now we have a very interesting case. What if we're going to establish? Just imagine this case. Imagine a bunch of buyers bought the land one from another. Here's what happened. Reuben owns land. Shimon occupied the land for a year, sold it to Levi, who occupied it for a year, who sold it to Yehuda, who occupied it for a year. The three guys occupied it for a year, and the first guy claimed, now it's already 3 years have passed, right? So the first guy claims he bought it from the original owner, but he doesn't have his paper anymore. So now but instead of using his occupancy of 3 years without protest to back up his claim that he bought it, we're going to use the 3 year occupancy of the consecutive buyers to back up the claim of the first occupant that he bought the land legally. Does it work? He said, you know what? You can. 3 buyers who bought it one from the other can back up the original claim of the first occupier who says, I bought it, but I don't have my paper anymore, even though the 3 years of occupancy to back up the claim happened between 3 people. But Rav said, but there's a condition here. It has to be you're right. The first guy doesn't have to have his paper because 3 years passed, but the second 2 guys have to have bought it with a paper. Okay, and why? Why is that? Because then, since they bought it with a paper, that made enough noise. When you sign a paper, but people hear about it. You have to get a paper. You have to sign it. People hear the word gets out. So therefore, what? So then you can say, listen, the guy should have protested. Okay, but if they didn't write a paper, then you can't use the 3 year occupancy because they had no reason to protest. You see, they're coming and going. Nobody's really honestly owns the property. They're not staying there. So he says, I didn't have to protest. No, the first one bought it, period. But he sold it. He sold it after occupying for 1 year. Right. A second occupied for 1 year and sold it. And third occupied for 1 year. Now the original owner wants his land back. And so the first occupant says, listen, I bought it from you. And I sold to the next guy. I sold to the next guy. And it was 3 years past already. I don't have my paper anymore. So the 3 years of occupancy without protest should back up my claim that I bought it from you and I don't have my paper anymore because 3 years passed. We said that's good, but only as long as the second guys who bought it from him both bought it with a paper. Why? Because the paper makes noise. When you have to get 2 witnesses, you have to go and they have to sign it and verify it. It's actually good. But that's enough noise that the guy would have heard. And we say, listen, you, the original owner, you should have protested. He didn't protest, so then the occupancy was unprotested. It works. And it'd be in between 3 people. But if he didn't write a paper, since he didn't hear about it, he can say, listen, the fact that I didn't protest proved nothing because I had no reason to protest. These guys were acting like a bunch of thieves. Why? This guy comes for a year, he goes. This guy, you see that it's a hot potato, and they're illegal. So I had no reason to protest. So it has to make noise. So the Gemara says it's a very interesting point. I lememra the Sava Rav, and the fact that Rav said the halach is they have to have bought with a paper to make enough noise for the original guy to have had needed to protest. Okay, Shtar Isle Kala Kala. What do you mean? So if they bought it with witnesses and they didn't buy it with a paper, that wouldn't have made enough noise for the guy to have to protest. So you're saying what? Are you saying as a general Rav hold what? A signed paper makes noise that people know, but a sale of land with witnesses does not make enough noise. He says, Amar Rav, didn't we learn the following? Now, I'm going to show you that Rav does indeed. Yes, yes. Rav himself holds that what? That even sale with witnesses makes enough noise. Let's take a look. Where do we see it from? You remember, I just want to explain one thing. When a person sells land, let's say with a paper, so it has called achrayas. That means what? It means that there's enough noise in it that the person who buys that land, let's say a guy takes a loan. A guy takes a loan takes a loan.
And he in the property.
One second. Yeah, a guy so when I sell you a piece of land with a paper, I'm telling you that I'm going to back you up. You know, saying if somebody forecloses on that piece of land because I had a loan earlier, I'm going to have to repay you. So let's take a look. So Rav said, if a guy sold a field only with witnesses, without a paper, and then that land was clawed back by whom? By creditors, or for a previous loan on the seller. Okay, so the buyer can come back and collect even from encumbered land. Knows that the guy who sold it to him had sold to others. Why? Because and they can't say, listen, we didn't know. The people who the seller sold to can't say we didn't know that somebody else had a lien on that on the land before us. No, the guy who he originally sold the land to with witnesses has a lien on the land. He can come back and get it, okay, because he was guaranteed. Now, one second, how can you say that? How can he take back land that the seller sold to other people after he bought his land? What do you mean? They're going to say, listen, since he didn't sell to you with the paper, we never heard that the land we bought was encumbered. So you see that we don't believe. You see that we do. Since he's allowed to collect it, we do believe that even witnesses. But even witnesses alone make enough noise that the people who bought land after this guy sold it to the other guy had enough warning that there was a piece of property sold with responsibility that they were going to be liable for. Mar says, no, it's not true. Also, he says there's a difference. Over there, the people who bought the second pieces of land, they caused the loss to themselves. Why? Because they had an obligation. Exactly. They had an obligation to go and find out if he'd sold any land before. It was upon them. But when there were three, but over here it's the other way. When there were three buyers who bought in turn this piece of land that the original owner said was never sold, okay, he had no reason to go find out if the land was sold. Okay, it wasn't his problem. He wasn't buying land. He had no obligation to do anything unless if he heard something, he heard something. So the answer is that you're making a mistake. You thought that the reason why Rav allowed buyer number one to collect the land from buyers 2 and 3 and 4 was because sale with witnesses alone gave them enough warning. No, it's not true. You know what? They didn't get warning from that, but they had an obligation themselves, even with no warning, to go and find out if land was sold. Exactly, which is not the case, but with a case where there was a previous owner and a guy occupied and another guy occupied, another guy occupied. If it's his land, he doesn't have to go finding out if people are selling his land. If he hears something, injustice happening, he'll scream. But if he doesn't hear, it's not his problem. He never had to go out and research, and that's the difference. Shkar Gadol. Yay.
Practically painless.
Practically painless. Ay, ay. Money is a big deal. The Gemara says there was once the Ben Ish Chai, he was a god ladoris. It was certainly he was known as, certainly for all the Friday movies, but for everybody. So once a guy, it was a din Torah, and a guy lost the money. I told him you have to pay. The guy's screaming and yelling and screaming. So the Ben Ish Chai said to the guy, I don't know what's going on in this. He said, you're a very God-fearing person. And if you had a ship at sea, and it was a question if maybe the cargo was comets that went over Pesach, and I would have told you, listen, it's also you have to dump all the cargo. You can't. So you would have done it. You wouldn't have screamed. Why are you screaming now? He said, I'll tell you the difference. He says, if I would have lost the ship with cargo, I lost. That's all. That's what God said. He said, but I'm going to lose and he's going to gain. That I'm screwing. So the Ben Ish Chai says, remember, we learned that the Gemara talks about that. It talks about you want to be, what should you learn? So what it says, Gemara says, what that monetary law is there's no bigger subject matter. If they said the language, the word miksoa of a subject is the same word as saka, as screaming. So that's why, because people can't stand it that they lose the money and the other guy gets it.
Yeah, I don't mind losing. I just don't mind.
Yeah. He lose. I get it.
It's a good for 9 days for see not clean.
You want an interesting case? The
Yeah.
first monetary case I ever did
Mm-hmm.
came up during the 3 weeks. This is a true story.